The fact, obviously, that City was so good, so dominant in the first half. What changed? How did Liverpool approach that?
I actually don't think they approached it any differently than how they approached it the first half. Because in the first, say, 10 minutes, if we're generous, Liverpool were harrying, they were pressing, they were getting the ball off City. And so I think that's all that happened. They just got a little bit closer to them.
Right.
Because in the first half, they couldn't get close enough. And then, of course, when the first guy is too far away, then it's like a domino effect. So they couldn't get anywhere near City. So, plus you've got to say they couldn't get any worse in the second half. And that's just a fact. They were better, but I'm not sure they were significantly better. I think probably it was a lot more to do with Manchester City weren't quite as good with their possession as they were in the first half, as much as Liverpool actually changed an awful lot.
I think, obviously, the big factor was a certain Mo Salah as well, Craig. What a second goal that was.
No, and we talked about him with Stevie at the end of the week, how he in particular bangs his head on the wall watching him sometimes because the ball's bobbling off him and he's losing it and everything's super fast. And then he does something that's just magical. And I mean, his stats will back everything up in terms of the goals. But special goals like that, and he can be having... He could be heading for the hook. He could be heading for like an early bath and a substitution with some of his performances. And then he does something like that and you think, wow, where did that come from? But interestingly enough, and also Mane's finish. Mane's been guilty of being wasteful in those positions last season and early this season. But actually, to go back to the change in the game, Klopp talked about it after. He said, look, we were too harried, we were too panicked in the first half. Not only did we not get close enough to Man City and we sat off them, but when we got possession, we panicked and we tried to go forward too early. And they just mopped it up and then it came back and it was wave after wave. And Liverpool were a little bit more, they weren't great, but they were a little bit more careful on the ball second half. They got a couple of extra passes in. And so they were able to retain possession a little bit better. And I think that's why they were able to get themselves back in the game. But we should also mention, guys, as bad a mistake as it was not sending off James Milner from the referee, what about the Cancelo attempted challenge? I mean, on Mo Salah for the first goal on the halfway line. I know managers that would take a player off for a challenge like that or an attempt of a challenge. I mean, all he's got to do is try and defend goal side properly. And he turned his back and he almost tried to backheel the ball out of play. I mean, João Cancelo is a fantastic footballer going forward. But it's moments like that that must just super frustrate his manager.
Just going back to the Salah goal, Nedum, defensively, how difficult is it to try and stop someone when they move that ball so quickly?
Yeah, as soon as someone like that gets ahead of steam, you're very much on the back foot. And what happened to Laporte, do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Lionel Messi against Jerome Boateng at the Camp Nou a few years ago. Because if you're not tight enough, then they're going to have their way with you. They're so good at being able to manipulate the ball and change direction based on where they think that you're going to go and where you slightly lean this way or lean that. And for Laporte, he's gone big trying to stop Salah from scoring with his left foot. But before you know it, you're on a highlight reel because he can go both ways. But I think as Craig was alluding to there, though, you expect more from Cancelo and so on. Because for someone like Salah, if you dive in, it makes it so easy for them. But overall, I think Cancelo played well. But it is those moments, as he says, which can be so frustrating because I think he's capable of being able to make it harder for people. So, yeah, Salah, absolutely incredible. You guys spoke about it on Friday. And, yeah, I'm going to have to walk back something I said, and he would definitely get into the City team, no questions asked before anybody else on that Liverpool side for me.
Shall we talk about Grealish again, Daniel?
Well, I just want the last thing on Salah, and then I want to talk about Jack Grealish and Phil Foden, in fact, from the City perspective. 18 months to go on Salah's contract. You get that sorted as soon as possible, don't you, if you're Liverpool, Stevie?
Absolutely. You kidding? Is there a hotter striker in the world right now? I'm not so sure there is.
No, exactly. It was exceptional today and very much kept Liverpool in it. Craig, of course, you mentioned Jack Grealish, and this is someone that we've discussed a lot, and for good reason, given that City spent £100 million on him in the summer. Once again, it's fair to say he didn't play like a £100 million player, did he?
Yeah. I just want to say before I pick up on that, there's 3 teams have stuck their head above the parapet, Dan, with a clear plan, and that is City, Liverpool, and Chelsea.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that those as a clear idea of what they want to do. Good games and bad games, but Man United are a team of cobbled together stars, and that's what's kind of we're seeing early on. And whether United are able to hang on to the coattails of these teams, Liverpool got a draw with City without playing particularly well. But going back to Grealish, yeah, I mean, clearly the lad is a very, very good player, right? There is no doubt about that. But this is a very unforgiving game. It's a very unforgiving league, and also it's a very unforgiving manager who just wants results. Now he played more central today, but he's on the periphery of games. I mean, you saw. I'm not seeing enough from him, anywhere near enough, and that's why he got dragged again. He got dragged in midweek. You look at the influence of Foden, who hasn't always played this season, had a poor summer. You look at Bernardo Silva. We talked about him with Nedum late on in the week. You look at that run he had in that first half. I mean, it was Messi would have been off his chair at that Bernardo Silva run. And then there was the end pass to Foden, which Foden should have taken first time. Right? These guys are all doing special little things within games. I've really yet to see that from Jack Grealish, and I think his confidence must be taking a little bit of a dent at the moment, because this is a big step up. He's walking into a dressing room full of superstars now, and when you're not performing, you go home, and it takes its toll. Now, he's not been terrible, but Man City, they need people to be not just less than terrible. They need them to be extremely good, like David Silva was for them, almost a 9 out of 10 almost every week. And unfortunately for him at the moment, I think he's coming close to being left out.
Guardiola has to look after him, though. I don't think we're the only ones that have figured out that Jack Grealish hasn't quite been at his 100 million best. His manager has to know that. So why are you playing him out of position? Why are you playing him in the middle? Yes, he's got ability, and yes, he's a good player, but he's not a centre forward, and he doesn't play through the middle. He's way better wide. So Guardiola has to look after him.
But he wanted Phil Foden to run it.
Why don't you put him on the other side, Craig? His position is coming. His best position is coming from a wide area. Generally, it's the left. Now, if you want to stick Foden on Milner, and you still want to play Grealish, then you play him on the other side. Right, you're telling me he can't play on the other side? Instead of that, you play him through the middle, which is alien to him. And listen, at the end of the day, whether he goes for 100 million or not, he's still like the rest of us. When you're not playing well, right, you start thinking about it. So the price fee makes no difference what he's getting every week. But to play him out of position, I think, was a big mistake.
Do you agree, Nedum?
I think we can look at this in sort of like a wider context and say that I think in some ways it's a great show of confidence in the manager to be able to play him in these 3 big games that they've just been involved in, and he hasn't been anywhere near his best. But then I'd also argue, as far as this season goes, neither is someone like a Kevin De Bruyne, but we're not really throwing as many eyes on him. But, I think Grealish, he can do more, he can do better. But this is a test. He has to realise this is the standard now. You look around you and there are great players everywhere. And he has to learn, for example, what it is to play in that sort of like false 9 role, because you look at someone like Phil Foden, he's done it. Someone like Raheem Sterling, he's done it. And if you want to be in the team, you have to be able to play in more than one position, understand the game and how it works out for the side. And to be fair to him, defensively or whatever, I know it's for £100 million, it's not the best thing in the world, but defensively, I think he's been part of there as a collective, and they've not really carried him from that side. But in terms of going in attack, he'll know himself he can do a lot better. And I think these moments, this sort of level of exposure to the toughest games possible, I think in the long run it will benefit him. And as it stands, the PSG game is not really costing City too much at the moment.
In contrast to what we saw from Grealish, I thought Phil Foden was great to watch today, Craig.
Yeah, and Phil Foden went into the Euros, looking like he was going to be the first name on the team sheet, and he was, until he didn't play particularly well. And then the Euros all went a little bit wrong for him. And again, we think about these young guys as nothing bothers them. Well, it does, because they're human beings and your confidence takes a knock. And so, I think his manager clearly will have been speaking to him like he does with all the players and say, listen, I want you back to that Phil Foden of last year and what you were doing. Let's think about your game. Let's get you back on track. And that was more like it. If you remember his performance at Anfield last year, I think it was last year anyway, it was absolutely out of this world. And that was, it wasn't quite as good today as that, but it was, and obviously he's up against a James Milner who was exposed. And so that makes it a little easier. But there are parts of his game, that in the first half he could have taken that one first time because he's good enough. And we saw in that strike in the second half just how good his left peg is. But that was, I think, from Guardiola's point of view, that was great to see him back looking kind of like his old self, because when he's on full form, he's fantastic.
You've been steadfast in your support of Guardiola, and not necessarily a striker is needed, considering, of course, they won the league without one last year, Nedum. But that first half did highlight, didn't you? You think that Foden chance that Alisson, of course, came out and smothered, the Kevin De Bruyne header that went way over the bar. If you've got a striker, a real number 9 in those situations, City are 2-0 up at half-time, aren't they?
Not necessarily. I think we talk about things in a perfect world. Like every striker scores every time they get a chance and every ball drops to them in the box. Like, let's be clear, that's not the case. I understand what people are saying, but it just feels just that little bit different. Like, even this weekend, you guys are going to be talking later about the fact that PSG have every attacker in the world available to them and they don't have a shot on target. Like, this is like, football is football. We can have an idea of what will work, but it's never a guarantee that will work. And as far as the sort of City thing goes with their forward line and so on, like, they've scored two goals and we're saying they should have scored more. I would wager that probably no more than maybe 2 or 3 teams this season will score 2 goals or more at Anfield for the rest of the year. So at the end of the day, I suppose they'll take the point and just know that they've got tons of players around who are capable of scoring and they don't need to rely upon one guy in particular. How
much of an Achilles heel is this going to be, though, Craig, going forward?
It is the big question. I don't know is the answer, because let's not forget that he's not available at the moment, but Ilkay Gundogan had his best ever goals tally from the middle of the park last year. So if that doesn't repeat itself, and the likes of Raheem Sterling who come off the bench, and the other guys, Kevin De Bruyne doesn't have as good a season, although he did score today. If these midfielders don't chip in, it's going to put an awful lot of pressure on one or two of the other guys. So it's hard to tell, because City do get themselves in so many good positions. But what we do know is that you can't keep doing what they did to PSG and Liverpool and not put the ball in the back of the net and get away with it, because like Liverpool today, they got better as the game went on. They were more clinical in their chances, and then it took a lot of guts for City to come back and win the game. That takes its toll. So, I mean, we were asking this question last year of them, Dan, without a striker, and I think this will rumble on all the way through to sort of March or April this year.
Just to tie a bow on this, Stevie, whose title credentials improved today?
Listen, I agree with every single thing Craig said. But if you were to ask me what team would you like to play in tomorrow, I'd probably say City.
Right.
I mean, they have completely... the 3 teams that we think are going to be fighting for the Premier League title, Manchester City being one of them, the other 2... Manchester City, I've just given both of them a lesson in how to pass the ball.
Correct.
So you can't go against City for that reason. However, it gets old and it eventually starts taking it out of you when you have to win by a goal when you're dominating it. Anybody can, this is not happened once this season already. This has happened 2 or 3 times to them in 8 or 9 games. You can't go through a season having to put that amount of effort and commitment in. You need some real easy games.
Right.
And when you've got a recognised goal scorer...
They've won by big margins already this season.
Yeah, but I get the feeling that this is just going to continue regardless of the opposition.
Go on, Craig.
No, actually, I think, if memory serves me right, a few of the games last year were not won by bundles of goals. They were won by good defending.
Yeah.
They weren't blitzing teams every week last year, so maybe we'll see that again. But just to go back to Stevie's point, he's right. I personally still think City are the team to beat. We can argue about they didn't get a striker, they didn't get this, they didn't get that. As Stevie said, right, they went to Chelsea, put a marker down big time. They've gone to Anfield today, drawn the game that I thought they should have won, and the referee certainly didn't favour them. Put a marker down big time, completely. They had Jurgen Klopp couldn't wait to get in at half time. He was sprinting down that tunnel, and he admitted it after. And also in defeat in Paris, and we know it's not the greatest PSG side because they've been beaten again today by Rennes, but they completely outplayed PSG for most of that game. Now, they didn't win it, but they've put a marker down to say, look, you know, we are going to be the team to beat. We're going to probably dominate you, and you know, we'll take our chances without a striker. But yeah, Man City are the guys to be shot at in the Premier League for sure.
Still title favourites for you, Nedum?
Yeah, I'd have to say so. I think we've seen a good version of Liverpool, very good version of Liverpool this year. We've seen a very good version of Chelsea at times this year. But I think for me, the key difference is when you look at Liverpool and say Chelsea to a certain extent, Liverpool are really good, but it feels like there's a certain level of dependency on, say, Salah or Mane to really step up and consistently score, for example. Whereas for City, I think it's the sum of their parts which makes them great. And when they have people coming off the bench like Sterling's, people coming back from injury like Gundogan and alike, I think that's the type of thing for me which makes them favourites. But it's not by a lot, but that's what it is for me.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.